Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome. Thank you, to No Tube. I'm here with Shredder Lives On.
Hi, Zam. Good to be here.
Thank you very much because, as you can tell, it is Wednesday night, which means it's time to talk about Dark Side of the Ring, Season 4, Episode 5, The Junkyard Dog. Now, I'm old enough to remember the Junkyard Dog wrestling back in the day, in the 80s. And he seemed to be somebody who definitely was wrestling very early on in the WWE, and all of a sudden he just vanished, like a lot of wrestlers do. Actually, you see them in the wrestling industry, and people like Psycho Sid and Ultimate Warrior and various others. One minute they're in, and the next you know they're gone. Like where the fuck did they disappeared to? And Junkyard Dog was definitely part of that contingent. I never knew that this particular person would be in a series like this, but it kind of made sense. Just want to give everyone some discrepancies regarding this. Some warning. There will be talk about racism and stuff like that, but not as much as I was expecting in this episode. By the way, Shredder, I really thought they'll be talking a lot more on racism. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that it never really had to go to that length or to that depth. Obviously, there was some mention regarding what it was like to be a black wrestler back in those days. But overall, what do you think of this episode, and what was your sort of thoughts?
Yeah, it was an interesting historical perspective on the Junkyard Dog. I didn't get to see a lot of him during his prime. Again, because I'm younger than you are. Obviously, I
Mhm.
can't remember how old you are, Zam. I'm only 36 years
Well,
old myself.
I'm 10 years older than you.
All right, okay. Well, but yeah, I go back and I watch a lot of historic wrestling, and I've not seen a lot of Junkyard Dog in Mid South. I've certainly heard a lot of his stuff. You certainly couldn't overlook the whole issue with racism and what it would have been like for Dog and any black wrestler back in those days, particularly the 70s and 80s. But yeah, I'm glad they focused a lot on Junkyard Dog himself and a lot of his personal issues because that's really the main focus in this story, and it deserved to be. And again, the racism I think was kind of like it was a key part in the story, but it wasn't as big as what Junkyard Dog himself went through. From his rise as a star in Mid South and eventually jumping to the WWF to then just disappearing pretty much off the face of the earth. And then obviously, fast forward a few years later, and he passes away from basically his drug use.
Yeah, I will say it's a credit to Junkyard Dog that he was able to overcome the audience in a way that they loved him regardless of him being black. And that was during maybe a period where it was very hard to maybe get over when being black or anything along those lines. But they loved him for it. He was a bit like some people called him like the Black Hulk Hogan. I looked at him more as the Black Dusty Rhodes. In my opinion, he had that common man, working class sort of gimmick about him, which I think found very appealing to a lot of blue collared people, in my opinion. Gaz, what do you think of this episode?
I thought it dealt with a lot of very difficult issues that unfortunately these Dark Side of the Rings have dealt with a lot. The main one being drug use and how it can be destructive for people. Like, we've had Jake Roberts, we've had
No, yeah, Jake Roberts, yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to think of the other major drug users who it's kind of like
Well,
took a toll on
Lloyd the
them.
Clown,
Yeah.
Brian
Yeah,
Pillman was a heavy pill. He was a
yeah.
heavy pill user.
I think amongst
So
those guys, I think like Tony Atlas mentioned that he was like doing coke and fucking getting laid. I mean, those fuckers were gigolos half the time as well, which was fascinating.
but I thought the other thing that was quite interesting was the kind of like the because I kind of delve into it a little bit with like kind of racial aspect because I think I think as much as they said it was like Junkyard was the first major star. I mean, I wouldn't agree with that necessarily because there's other black wrestlers I can think of, like for example, who before this, like Barbara Brazil, A-Lad, people like that, who kind of like were kind of like the sort of pioneers. But I think Junkyard did a lot to kind of bring other people to the kind of mainstream, if you're kind of going to say that. But I thought this was a very kind of touching episode in a way, because I got to see kind of some of the things he had to put up with.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I think where I would disagree with Gary there is I think that in terms of Junkyard Dog, I think Junkyard was probably one of the first national stars, because Bobo Brazil was more of a territory star, and the same with Ernie Ladd. So, but Junkyard Dog eventually went to the WWF, and he was one of the first prominent black stars there. I would say him, Coco Beware, and probably I want to say Bad News Allen. They're the first three I can think of as like national stars when it came to black wrestlers. Tony Atlas as well eventually went too, but I think Junkyard went first.
Comment here from Daniel Vance is a good one. I found it odd hearing Ross talk about how sad it was that black wrestlers couldn't get hired if another babyface, I think he meant black babyface, was already on the roster, but wasn't Ross in charge of the booking?
No, he wasn't. Not in Mid-South. Mid-South, it was Bill Watts who was in charge. Jim Ross was an assistant to him, but it was ultimately Bill Watts who had the say. In a territory, it used to be a case of, in certain territories, they would only hire one ethnic superhero, effectively. And that's been a philosophy that's gone on for a number of years. For example, even TNA. Even TNA recently did it, I want to say, 2010? When they were pushing Hernandez, and when they were pushing him as Supermax, he was supposed to be the ethnic babyface for the Hispanic audience. Where that happened again frequently throughout the territories, where you would have one wrestler from an ethnic background pushed as a top star. So one black wrestler or one Italian wrestler in the case of I want to say Bruno Sammartino in the WWF back in the day. Pedro Morales in the WWF was the Hispanic superhero. But Jim Ross didn't have that much pull in Mid-South.
It's interesting to see like how different Senior was to Junior regarding that, because he did make an issue of like getting various different wrestlers from different parts of the world or different ethnicities. So there will always be a fan base for those people. So for the who can associate themselves with that particular wrestler, and Bob Backlund being the only white American guy, I mean, you had Bruno Sammartino who was Italian, but
we had other guys to appeal to the white audience too. I mean, Superstar Billy Graham was another one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it was fascinating, and obviously Vince then turned things around and blonde, blue-eyed, fucking babyface Hulk Hogan and all of that. Yeah, and to a degree under him, and I think various copycat organizations and businesses like WCW and TNA to a degree, they always marketed minorities in a way that is stereotypical of what they should be. Like one thing, like you saw like Latina wrestlers, like fucking driving around on lawnmowers. You saw Crime Time and shit like that. Harlem Heat, all of this sort of stuff, even though those guys were Texans. It was like, it was like, and it was always like the most negative stereotype you can get. I'm very happy like things are changing now, because Mustafa Ali being a prime example of somebody who you could easily have a shape gimmick or something along those lines. And he isn't. He just comes across as a regular dude who happens to be Muslim of Middle Eastern descent, and they're not throwing him down this stereotype, which I'm very happy to see. It's good.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, look at when they pushed Jinder Mahal. They were trying once again to capitalize on an Indian market that really just wasn't doing anything for them. It's the same with when they pushed the Great Khali. That was actually quite funny when Khali was getting pushed as a main heel on the WWE roster. They would re-edit the programming for India so that Khali was the babyface and Undertaker was the heel.
Fascinating.
But again,
Fascinating.
this does go on. They do still, in some cases, deliberately push people based on ethnicity if they're wanting to try and appeal to a certain market. So again, Jinder Mahal and Great Khali would be my examples
Oh
of them
yeah,
doing it in recent times. And
yeah.
obviously,
Jinder Mahal.
once Jinder Mahal kind of flopped, that's when they put the belt on AJ Styles, and they had AJ Styles run as the champion for a while.
Yeah, Jinder Mahal kind of struck gold. I mean, if he was a better wrestler, who knows? I mean, he's got the look, definitely. You know what I mean? He's got that McMahon look that he loves. Muscular with veins pop, that sort of shit.
Yeah, he
But
had the back knee, which was a typical sign of steroid use.
yeah,
The problem was is that like he was put in like kind of jump spot, and then all of a sudden put into like a main event spot. You need to sort of earn your way to getting that, and the thing is by skill.
I mean, it's been done before. I mean, look at JBL. JBL went from being a tag team wrestler right through to, right immediately to immediately after the breakup of APA, and Ron Simmons was quote unquote fired. What happens? JBL immediately becomes a main event heel.
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah, even for me, when there was a little break in wrestling, I remember watching people like Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, getting being this sort of jobber with blue blood guy, come back to wrestling after a few years, or not even a few years, a couple of years, and next thing you know, he's not talking like a blue blood anymore, and he's acting all fucking modern and stuff like that, sounding American, and like what the fuck's going on? He seems to be much more main event. And regarding Jinder Mahal as well, like he has been in the industry for a long time, so it's not like he's like somebody who was new, who just got thrusted into the spotlight.
Oh, sure, but he went from jobber to main eventer, almost in a heartbeat.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I do like that. I do sometimes like the fact that somebody out of nowhere can win the big title. That's the sort of thing I find very appealing, and I don't think there's hardly any of that within the WWE. Something like that is a blue moon thing, and I very much appreciated it when it happened to Jinder Mahal. It was like, wow, I never saw that coming. I don't think many people did. But I think people could understand when it did happen. Just a couple more comments here. Carly was always a baby face. You must be misremembering. Yeah, I liked. Look, I've always liked JBL as part of the Acolytes. Even like there was just something really, really cool about him and Ron Simmons just wrecking shit. They were arguably my favorite tag team. And we have
and to be fair, JBL, he struck gold with that gimmick.
Yeah,
he was fantastic as a heel. The thing I kind of didn't like at the start was when they really went quite far, where they had him at the Mexican border intercepting illegal immigrants. I thought that was a bit too far.
Yeah. And it is funny as well. Like 1 minute he's like a beer drinking party animal, and next thing you know he's a fucking, next thing you know he's he's a fucking an oil baron. He was basically like the new Ted DiBiase, in my opinion. Funeral friend, as long as you don't blame extreme capitalism for everything that goes wrong, mate. Extreme capitalism is to blame for everything. Ginger Greek, Acolytes are my all-time. Yeah, they're good, man. Yeah, they're fucking fantastic. They're beer drinkers, poker players, smoking cigars and shit like that. Muscle for hire and everything. I love them, and yet I think throughout their at one point they were kind of tweenerish, but then people liked them so much that they became faces. I love that. Like anti-hero faces. I love watching a rich white guy going over and whining the title. Surely a rarity in the WWE. Exactly.
Well, in fairness,
exactly.
I really wish back in the day they would have put the belt on Ted DiBiase. He would have been a phenomenal heel champion.
Yeah, exactly. He could have. You could see him buying people out and stuff like that.
Remember, he tried buying the belt off of Andre the Giant. That's why they wound up having the tournament at WrestleMania 4.
That storyline is so good.
Here's an interesting thing before we get back to the show. Anyone notice how the show is trying to paint Ted DiBiase as a good guy? I've noticed the fact that because of his history and stuff like that, but I know he's been done for fraud.
I think this is to do with his activity with regard to wrestling. They're not addressing, obviously, the fact that he and his church are being prosecuted for millions of dollars of fraud. That's a separate matter.
Yeah.
That might be its own Dark Side of the Ring episode at some point eventually as well. But with regard to the way he's been inside the ring and inside wrestling locker rooms, I think it's been pretty accurate from what I've heard so far.
No, he means the church. Like him being like a reverend and all of that sort of stuff, you know.
Oh, you mean him doing his revival events?
Yeah. Wait, get lost. Get lost. All right. So back to this episode. One of the things which kind of struck me because I never really knew. Jesus Christ, man! You're here to piss me off, aren't you? Yeah, let's get lost. One of the things I noticed with Junkyard Dog was how absolutely ripped he was in his times in what was the promotion he was in?
Mid-South
Wrestling. Because when I saw Junkyard Dog in the WWE, he was a lot more burly. You know, he had a bit of a gut, you know what I mean? And I never knew that he was much more ripped, a very, very muscular, hench guy back in Mid-South. And obviously the toll of being on the road and then all the drugs and alcohol, he did have a massive effect on his body. Ginger Greek says, most surprising thing for me in this episode was Coco Beware and Atlas are still alive. No, I can't believe you thought they passed away. Even I knew they were still alive, dude. You know what I mean? Even I want to know if Coco Beware still has a parrot. And maybe Frankie, because parrots live like for fucking ever.
No, Frankie's been dead for a number of years.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, but in fairness, Dog was I believe he played college and football right up until the mid-70s when he went to work for I think it was Jerry Jarrett when he first went there, because he started working in Tennessee first, and then I think it was a few years later that Bill Watts picked him up and brought him into Mid-South. So that's why he was ripped back in those days. This was before, I would say, the drugs probably took a hold of him and he started getting a bit lazy.
Well, anyway, whilst he get lost. Whilst he was in Mid-South, Bill Watts did find him, pushed him to the moon. He was really popular with the local people. He had his gimmick, he had his catchphrase. Get lost, man! Jesus Christ!
I mean, because the thing is that he was wrestling before that. I think because I think they showed a couple of matches he had in Stampede when he was wrestling Jim Neidhart and all that sort of stuff. So because I think Jim Ross said that he'd because the Mid-South when he found the Junkyard Dog gimmick. I can't remember how years he'd been in the business before that.
Yeah, Bill Watts is the guy who gave him the Junkyard Dog gimmick. Well, gave him the name and the gimmick. He'd been working, as I said, it was about 5 or 6 years before that. He started with, I think it was Jerry Jarrett. Then he moved to Nick Goulis's promotion in Tennessee, which was Mid-America. And then he had a stint in Stampede. But his first major push really was Mid-South. And Bill Watts made him a star.
Yeah, Brutus apparently heard me say Coco Beware, and that's his hero. Yeah, he is the Birdman. So, okay, so he was in that industry, but he was a guy who couldn't wrestle to save his life, but he had something about him. But then again, it seems that a lot of wrestlers who couldn't wrestle to save their lives can get pushed to the moon in this industry. In a way, it's almost. I feel sorry for people who can wrestle because they're there to make people who can't wrestle look good, And
Hogan can wrestle very well. It's just that he does a lot with not a lot.
I mean, there's the reason that Iron Sheik became the transitional champion, because Backlund reportedly refused to lose the belt to Hogan because Hogan couldn't wrestle.
Yeah, even people like Bret Hart said he couldn't wrestle. But then again, you see those rare videos of him in Japan, and he's doing stopover, leg toe hold, crossover, fucking flip black, fucking paddy whack, fucking ghetto blasters and all that sort of shit. You know what I mean? So Yeah, it's unusual. I mean, I think when it came to Western audiences, we never really saw him wrestle. He was more of a poser, and then Jesus Christ, my bird. When it came to like New Japan, he really had to show, or just Japanese wrestling in general, he really had to show what he's worth. But regarding Junkyard Dog, he definitely was limited. He seemed to be more of a brawler, than an actual wrestler. Like even looking back at him now, from what I can remember of him, I can't remember many moves. The guy was always striking people, and you say I'm ready for a
he
reaction.
was very like Goldberg-esque in that he's very football heavy. So he did a lot of tackles, a lot of like slams, a lot of like kind of like throwing people off ropes and like doing like shoulder tackles and stuff like that. So a lot of like power moves. He wasn't really like doing like the finesse moves. Sorry.
It's a bit like Magnum TA as well, because Magnum TA, when he would be on TV, he would squash people fairly quickly. And then so the house shows, he'd be working guys and learning his craft in the ring. Now, Junkyard Dog, it was a case of the guys would be put in there, they'd have to work to his strengths and, hide his weaknesses, which is what any booker wants for a top star. You don't want, this guy that you're pushing as a top star to be shown up and made a fool of. So you put him in there with guys that you trust and you hope that he learns something. The Dog didn't learn a hell of a lot, but it was enough for him to get by, and his charisma alone was enough to make him a star.
Okay, a couple of comments here. First of all, Bendover, loving the fact that we talk about big sweaty men. You're damn right. And secondly, just so you know, both my male birds, they've been jousting with each other for a while. They both want to bang Blue, and they're both fighting hardcore to shag her, and that's why Brutus is making a lot of noise, because prior to today, Gunner, the other male, he was a bit of a coward, but he just grew a pair of balls today, and him and fucking Brutus, they've been fighting like cat and dog. But yeah, I will check. Actually, I will check just in case. So before I do check, like his career was going pretty well. He like most stuff. It is a bit of a riches to story. Unfortunately, no, riches to rags.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Riches to rags. I know what I'm saying. Yeah, regarding this, it is rags to riches, then riches to rags. But I'm saying that these guys have it all, and then they don't. Then they kind of, in a way, it disappears. 1 minute you're wrestling in front of 90,000 seater stadiums, and next thing you know, you're fucking in school halls. 1 minute you're making like $10,000 a week, and next thing you know, you'd be lucky to make $10 a week. So it can change, on a dime. But he was, being the top tier baby face, he was very popular. The gimmick, the storyline that made me smile the most was when the Fabulous Freebirds apparently blinded him.
Yes.
And there's one guy from the audience was gonna get his gun out and it probably kill Michael Hayes. Something along those lines. And
this is something that wrestling doesn't do anymore, which is like, do something like this, because the thing is that because like it doesn't do like injury angles anymore and stuff like that, which is
No, I'm still here. I just quickly got to check on my bird. Keep talking, guys.
But I thought that the way they described that, I actually want to go back and look at that thing storyline, because the way they described it, it sounded like so awesome. Like all the people invested.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been times where again they worked injury angles, and also there's other times where angles have incited people so much that they have gone out of their way to actually fuck with the wrestlers afterwards. So I'm trying to remember. I think it was the Midnight Express. They tarred and feathered Butch Reed, and all of a sudden they go outside, and I think it was Bobby had been tarred and feathered afterwards. Because to the fan, they'd done the whole tar and feather angle or painted somebody yellow before, and it got a reaction. But then they went and did it down in the Deep South, where it brought up a lot of memories for people. Obviously, the fact they were tar and feathering people for real down there, and it was a part of a lynching process. But again, injury angles. Hell, the Sandman worked a blinding angle in ECW, and it got over because Sandman didn't answer his fucking door. He got his wife to answer the door. He wouldn't be seen around town, and that's not something that would go on these days. If a guy is out injured, they're generally not going to work an angle. They'll put out on social media, yeah, I'm out for so long, or look, I'm not really hurt, or that kind of thing. It's kind of hard to do these days. It's just because people are just not prepared to invest the time in doing it.
Yeah, I saw some other clips of from other episodes in the past, though, like Jerry Lawler. Like he was in his Trans Am, and this one guy threatened to throw a brick at his car.
I don't think that was Dark Side. I think that was Tales from the Territory.
Yeah, it wasn't Dark Side, but
yeah.
I saw that clip on YouTube. But absolutely fascinating. Somebody did, and he was going to kill that guy. He was going to run him over and stuff. And there was one thing where Jimmy Hart was being carried away by one of these wrestlers over his shoulder.
Yeah, and he got homemade blow dart in his ass.
Somebody shot a blow dart on his ass. Yeah, like, oh my god. I mean, back then, like people thinking it was real was such a big deal, and it's hard to know when it really all. I mean, a lot of people say it was when the Click started, like, that kind of blew open everything. And also one time Vince McMahon basically said it was all pantomime as well.
Vince outright said, "Look, this is all a show," because he wanted to deregulate it in terms of taxes.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing because like for years people were keeping it as real and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden someone like him, because of his greed. But nevertheless,
you also had the 2020 expose where who the fuck was it? He was too shit to ever make it anywhere. Fuck. But he went on 2020 and he exposed the business. He showed exactly how everything was done.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
Was this John Stossel? Was this John Stossel?
It was John Stossel, yeah, who did the interview, but I can't remember what wrestler it was.
It was just
showing everything.
This is fucking bugging me now. I'm gonna have to check.
I remember that he was doing everything about having his head hit on turnbuckle and all of that sort of stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
but it was so worth it just to see Dr. Davis smack the shit out of that guy.
Yeah, that was great. But I'm trying to remember who the fuck it was that he did the interview with. That
what it is, Jim, is that they would cut themselves sometimes. I mean, sometimes they would accidentally get cut open. It wasn't always on purpose that they would cut, but back then they would do blading just to add a bit of realism. I think blading is frowned upon now. If blood does happen, it's usually by accident nowadays. I'm not sure how AEW. I'm not sure how AEW and Indies are, but I know WWE stopped the blading. That's for sure. So like it's a bit like Brock Lesnar when you got cut open against Cody Rhodes. That wasn't intentional, but shit happens. But you can definitely tell that WWE milked the fuck out of that. That's for sure. You know what I mean? So we're going back to Junkyard Dog. The sky was the limit for him. Vince McMahon was buying all the territories now. He was nationally expanding wrestling, and he got lured by that green.
Yeah,
he got lured by it. He had an opportunity to go to pastures new, wrestle with icons like Hulk Hogan, earn some serious money. And even though Bill Watts was the guy who made him who he is, he showed no loyalty to Bill, even though he was the top guy where he was. And this is the thing where I've always believed the grass is not always greener on the other side. And this was a prime example that even though he was joining the WWE, he was never going to be the top guy ever. And even then his star only shined for so long before he was going to end up being a jobber, and his career was diminishing, and he was missing events and doing a lot of drugs. It was actually the beginning of the end the moment he joined the WWE, in my opinion. Would you agree?
I think a lot of it was probably Dog's own doing. Just to get back to that wrestler I was thinking about who exposed the business, it was Eddie Mansfield who did that.
Yes.
Eddie Mansfield did the 2020 interview, but just back to Junkyard Dog. He left Bill Watts. Obviously, the WWF was offering far too much money that he couldn't really say no. Now, again, you can look at Dog's career. Unfortunately, okay, was he ever going to be the top star for the WWF? Probably not. But he made a lot of money. He was made a lot of money from action figures. He made a lot of money from the cartoon. And again, a lot of his downfall was ultimately his own doing because he couldn't move as well as he used to. A lot of that was down to him getting lazy with his cardio. And again, he never improved as a worker. Which, okay, fair enough. He maybe didn't need to in the WWF under the Vince McMahon era because the 80s cartoonish style that would probably have been right up his street. The big downfall, though, was unfortunately his drug addiction because look at what eventually happened. He kept missing dates and was ultimately fired.
Yeah, that was unfortunate for him. He was.
The one thing that I kind of disagreed with in this was Tony Atlas saying that, you can't do what white man did. I was like thinking, dude, there's tons of white guys who missed dates who got fired from that era of WWE. I don't know what told him that they didn't.
No, you could get easily replaced if you were a black wrestler in the territories in those days. Then you could very, very easily be replaced. They would find another black wrestler looking for the spot and bring them in. You were held to a higher standard by bookers, and particularly in places in the South, you were held to a much, much higher standard by bookers and territories if you were a black or other ethnic minority wrestler.
Honestly, Gary, I know where they're coming from. As an ethnic minority myself, I can exactly know what they're talking about. There is to a degree, a little bit different rules for one demographic to another because you can get easily stereotyped. You're black, that means you're lazy and you don't want to come to work and all of this sort of shit. It can really affect you, unfortunately. So you have to work twice as hard. You are an ethnic minority just so you don't get labeled as a stereotype. And it's unfortunate. Yeah. Whatever. One day you'll be an ethnic minority in your fucking country. Then you tell me how you like it, you cunt. All right. Yeah.
I was gonna say, well, the other thing that they kind of brought up the thing was the alleged racism that Bill Watts said to, was it Grizzly Smith?
Grizzly Smith,
that
Junkyard Dog was an N-word. Yeah, Junkyard Dog, he's an N-word.
What do you guys think about that?
Heard it, he was an N-word. Now, I can believe that
he
Bill
came
Watts
out the fucking toilet like the Terminator, by the way.
The toilet just went off the phone hinges.
Yeah, he kicked
I can believe Watts had said it because there's been other interviews with wrestlers and other people in the business, black people in the business who've said that Watts openly used the N-word in front of them. Too Cold Scorpio, for example, has said that Watts, when he hired him in WCW, said, was outright blunt with him and said, odds are I will call you the N-word, but stick with me and you will make a lot of money.
Exactly.
Watts also has made some quite disturbing comments of his own in the past, which may or may not have got him fired from WCW. Now, I've got the quote here. This is from an interview that Bill Watts did in 1991 with Pro Wrestling Torch. Now, this was the statement. If you want a business and you put money in, why shouldn't you be able to discriminate? It's your business. If free enterprise is going to make or break it, you should be able to discriminate. It should be that, by God, if you're going to open your doors in America, you can discriminate. Why the fuck not? That's why I went into business, so that I could discriminate. I mean, really.
Oh, God.
I mean, I want to be able to serve who I want to. It's my business. It's my investment. I can't tell a fag to get the fuck out. I should have the right to not associate with a fag if I don't want to. I mean, why should I have to hire a fucking fag if I don't like fags? Fags discriminate against us, don't they? Sure they do. The blacks discriminate against whites? Who's killed more blacks than anyone? The fucking blacks. But they want to blame that bullshit Roots that came on the air. That Roots was so bullshit. All you have to do if you want slaves is to hand beads to the chiefs and they gave you slaves. What is the best thing that's ever happened to the black race? That they were brought to this country. No matter how they got here. You know why? Because they intermarried and got educated. They're the ones running the black race. You go down to the black countries and they're all broke. Idi Amin killed more blacks than we ever killed. You see what I mean? That's how stupid we are. But we all get caught up in this bullshit rhetoric, and it's so ridiculous what's happening to our country. Lester Maddox was right. If I don't want to sell fried chicken to blacks, I shouldn't have to. It's my restaurant. Hell, at least I respect him for his stand. I want to point out, just for the context, Lester Maddox was a restaurant owner who in the 1960s, he served only white people. And he was told that he was legally required to desegregate his restaurant. And instead, he decided just to fucking close up. This is a lot of the shit that you would hear from... This is a lot of shit you would hear nowadays from people like Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro. This idea that, why shouldn't people be allowed to discriminate? And I believe that Watts had also gone on to something about black-on-black crime as well. But yeah, Watts was fired about a year later for these contexts. I'm reading. That's an interview I was reading from Bill Watts that he gave to Pro Wrestling Torch. So that was all a statement from Bill Watts. So yeah, I can believe he called Junkyard Dog the N-word. But Bill Watts, in just to put more context in this as well, Bill Watts was trying to say that no, he's not a racist. Because he was involved in a high school football program that was very, very successful. When his black teammates were not getting served, the entire team just got up and walked out. But that's what Watts has claimed anyway. But he says he wasn't a racist, but again, he's made statements like that.
I like the way when I say liked, I say that I dislike. But regarding how he generalizes, because he hates gays, so he assumes that gays hate people who hate him straight people, which it's crazy in a way because that's such a fallacy. It's just they want to be treated equally, which, as we all know, is the case. And all these other things as well. It's amazing that he would he would push somebody like JYD, but I guess he could see past his discrimination to a degree, and he saw money when he saw JYD.
Yeah, he said my favorite color is green.
Yeah. Bill Watts said that, or was it?
Yeah, Bill Watts has previously said that. He says my favorite color is green, which is money.
By the way, just in the sense of balance. There was a thing saying that Bill Watts has said that these claims aren't true.
Yeah, of course he would say that. He would. It makes him look really.
He got fired shortly. He got fired. He made these comments in 1991. It was 1992 that he got fired, just a few months into the job. The rumor is that Mark Madden faxed a copy of that interview onto Hank Aaron at TNT. And that's when they decided to fire him.
Yeah, Well, he did end up in WCW, which would be a saving grace for Junkyard Dog, because whilst he was in the WWE, he obviously he did a lot of drugs, and the WWE back then didn't give a fuck about how much drug he usually did, as long as he showed up. That was the fundamental rule. And eventually he wasn't showing up. And so he got kicked to the curb. And that's when I go riches to rags, because, like I said, when you're in the WWE, you're in the big league. That's where the fucking money's at. But then he was obviously not making that money anymore. And now you see it with wrestlers. 1 minute they're in the top tier business, and next in school gymnasiums, in front of a crowd of like 20, it's like, what the fuck?
We're overlooking something very during his time as a star. I mean, the fact that we've heard the stories all throughout the years about the guys, taking women back to the hotel rooms. Dog would bring
Yeah.
women back to the hotel rooms and then charge the guys money
What
to
a
actually hook
fucking
up with these
don.
women.
What if he did? I have to admit.
And then
Yeah,
he beat the
like,
fuck out of one of these women's husbands.
I have to admit, yeah, this is where my respect for Junkyard Dog went through the fucking roof. Because even though he did a lot of shit, the fact that he would sell himself, I mean, if I could sell myself to women and make them pay for me to have sex with them,
Well, no,
that'll
he wasn't charging the women to have sex with them. What he was doing was like he would get all these women back in the hotel rooms, and he was charging the boys $100 a time. He was charging the other wrestlers $100 a time to hook up with these women.
I swear the women would be paying them. Honestly,
No. Dog was charging the boys to hook up with these women. He was effectively working as a pimp.
Oh my god! I always thought. I genuinely thought the women were the ones who wanted.
That's what I thought as well.
They all showed up to the hotel room, and Dog.
Yeah.
They'd all be there with Dog, but Dog would charge the boys like $100 a time. It's like, yeah, you want to, come in here, hook up with a woman.
Is it? Look, because even this is what
I may have misinterpreted. I may have misheard that, but I thought it was the case he was paying. Well, the boys were paying him to hook up.
No, because what Tony Atlas
said.
I
heard it was the women who paid.
Yeah, what Tony Atlas said is that the way Junkyard Dog was doing things, that these women, they all wanted to sleep with them, but he would make them pay for the privilege of sleeping with them, so he'd be getting money off them. And there's Tony Atlas like doing all these drugs, fucking all these groupies, and getting $100, for them to fuck him as well. Like it was.
Well, he was
amazing.
Fucked. Tony Atlas had this fetish for feet. He's got this weird fetish for having women stomp on his face.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all have our fetishes, man. I mean, I've got a few, trust me. So yeah, that was remarkable. So for me, it's Junkyard Dog really taking advantage of it, making a business out of groupies, because most people in the fame industry, groupies just there to have sex with them. He's actually charging them for the privilege of fucking him. You know what I mean? Yeah. Slow clap.
Yeah.
Slow clap. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Daniel wants. Yeah.
Look, a lot of unfortunately, he did go to work for WCW. I don't know how much of a saving grace it was. For me, it kind of felt like when George Scott was the booker at WCW, he went back to what he knew, which was obviously he brought in guys like the Iron Sheik. So this is when Iron Sheik was practically fucking immobile. Again, Bill Watts, he brought in Junkyard Dog to WCW, and he thought, right, I'm going to try and make this guy a star again. But look,
well, WCW were taking
the bloom had gone off of it, and he tried in Mid-South to push a new black face of the company, and unfortunately none of them ever had the same star power that Junkyard Dog did, and he tried again in WCW, and that's where we had Ron Simmons beating Vader for the title. But Ron Simmons was great, but he was never anywhere like the kind of star on a level that Junkyard Dog was for Mid-South.
Didn't you just confirm you about Rewatch and the girls would pay them for sex?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I've misremembered that. In fairness, I watched it 13 hours ago.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that because they would try to book was it 3 or 4 guys they went with. I can't remember who the guys were. I don't think I've actually heard of any of them.
Sorry, what?
Well,
do you know the guys that Bill Watts tried to replace Doug with?
Butch Reed was one of them.
Butch Reed
was probably the best one that they had, but again, unfortunately, he didn't have the star power, the magnetism that Junkyard Dog had.
I hate calling people like the black so and so, but unfortunately for me, he was the black Lex Luger. You know what I mean? And Butch Reed, in my opinion,
was better than that.
Oh yeah, Butch Reed was a far better worker.
Really? Jake the Snake didn't think he was that good a wrestler. I mean, he even said it in this show. But then again, Junkyard Dog wasn't a good wrestler either. But nevertheless, yeah, they tried to get that alternative guy, and it wouldn't work. But going into WCW, it seemed like a safe haven for a lot of ex guys who were part of the WWE. Finally, there's another place to go to, which is where you can make a bit of money and have a bit of stability, which was WCW. But I think this is where Junkyard Dog kind of got it wrong a little bit, because he should just be happy that he's got a fucking job now. You know what I mean? Like, he's never going to be the top tier guy. You know, you be a mid carder. Maybe if you work hard enough, maybe there is a chance for you to have one run at the top. You know, but other than that, he had a second chance, and he fucking blew it as well. So it was unfortunate.
Yeah, and
That was the case,
afterwards,
and it was with Bill Watts as well. Like, you know, for Bill Watts to take it back after what he done with him. But I guess if anyone knows how to work with Junkyard Dog, it would probably be Bill Watts anyway. So, you know.
well, again, Bill Watts thought he could go back to what he knew, which was, again, Junkyard Dog, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. It's the same with Bill Watts. Completely altered the programming style of WCW, and it wasn't for the better.
No, like
Usually
there was like
Yeah, he took the protective mats off the floor, for example, and he banned wrestlers from coming off the top rope.
And he also said off the lights. He also said off the lights, and he had like these weird rules where like no wrestler could leave the arena early until the match had ended, and all this sort of stuff. It's just like really bizarre stuff that he did.
Well, these old school draconian rules, because he was a bit of a iron fist promoter, and you know, stuff like that wasn't going to work with everybody, you know, because, you know, they want to be treated like what industry you work in, you want to be treated like a fucking human being, and Bill Watts wasn't doing that. So yeah, it was never going to pan out. You know, if you're a high flyer and you can't go on the top ropes, that's half your fucking moveset gone.
Oh yeah, and he also tried slashing everybody's contracts. Brian Pillman was probably the most notorious example, where Watts, two examples I would say. Bill Watts fucking people's contracts. One was Brian Pillman, the other was Jake Roberts. Because Jake Roberts had negotiated, I think it was with Kip Fry, for a major deal in WCW where he was going to make $750,000 a year guaranteed, and that was I think that was a 3-year deal. He gets there. He's already burnt his bridge with Vince McMahon. Watts sees the contract. He rips it up right in front of Jake's face, and he hands him a new deal. I think it was worth something like only about $150,000 a year.
Bloody hell! I mean, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, and again, Jake's already burnt his bridge with Vince McMahon, so he thinks, well, fuck, what choice do I have? Brian Pillman was on a contract for quite a lucrative deal. Watts wanted to renegotiate with him, and he wanted him to take a pay cut. And Pillman refused to do it, and Watts told him, I'll job you out. And Pillman's response allegedly was, well, fine, I'll be the highest paid jobber in wrestling.
Nice. Fair enough. Yeah, good way of looking at it. So
yeah, but as I said, like, sorry,
go on.
I was going to say,
go on.
Yeah, I think did okay for himself considering how bad his drug problems were at this point. Because I think like his nephew was talking about the fact that he did like coke literally in front of him.
Yeah, his nephew said that he kept one of his pinky nails long to basically take coke out of the bag and snort it.
Yeah, and Junkyard said to him, "If I ever see you do this, I'll fucking kill you," or something along those lines. But it's very much do as I say, don't do as I do, type thing with Junkyard.
After he got fired from WCW, what was that, 93? He started working all these little independent shows and in a lot of cases he would fuck over the promoters. So he'd show up, he'd do like maybe about 30, 40 seconds in the ring and then leave. Or in other cases, he'd take a deposit and not show up. Rip Rogers has told the fact that he booked Junkyard Dog, sent him a $200 deposit, and then he arranged for, I can't remember who it was, but he arranged for somebody to go and pick him up. And the guy comes back and says, "Well, there's no dog at the airport." He realized Junkyard Dog fucked him, took $300 and didn't show up.
This is really stupid, a Junkyard Dog, but you can only get away with that for so long before people will not want to do any business with you.
Yeah, but I think when you're a drug addict, do you really care at that point?
Yeah, I guess. It was very sad to know about his daughter, because when we were speaking to the nephew, was basically representing Junkyard as the family member. And I thought initially when you mentioned the daughter, I was hoping the fact that the daughter was somebody who just didn't want to be on dark side, but no, that wasn't the case. She had died herself. She had a heart issue, and she was like 31 years old. You know what I mean? Which is terrible. I mean, she was alive long enough to induct her dad into the Hall of Fame, which was nice. But she never really lived a long, fruitful life, and that is a shame. It would be nice to hear from her regarding Junkyard Dog. I mean, I'm sure she has a lot of stories, which unfortunately she's now taken to her grave. But Junkyard himself, when it came to his final days, his nephew saw him at a family get together. He missed the graduation of his daughter. Typical wrestler, by the way. To miss something like that. He's like, the birds are just going right at it.
That's the thing. I don't think it was a case of even it was anything to do with the wrestling, because he wasn't working for any major company at that point, or probably not even working in any of the independents. It could be that he was wasted somewhere.
Exactly, and just like seeing him come to the family get together, and he obviously picked up his great niece, and had a picture of her, and that was one of the last pictures of him taken whilst he was alive. He had vomit all in the inside of the door of his car. That wasn't really taken too seriously, but in hindsight, you kind of wish it was, because I think he ended up dying in a car crash. Is that correct?
He did. Yeah, he did. He died in a car wreck.
Yeah, and car crashes seem to be a common thing for wrestlers, unfortunately. More often than not, they have whether it kills them or whether it cripples them. They have a lot of issues on the road.
Yeah, because it was a 9-hour drive each way, and he'd been there. He'd driven the 9 hours solid. He'd been at this family gathering, and then he decided, to just get in the car and drive home again.
Yeah, incredible that he would do something like that. And he had a crash along the way, and it took his life. And that was the end of the Junkyard Dog. What year did he die?
I want to say it was 1998.
99, I think.
Let's quickly Google this.
Was it 98, 99? I can't remember.
Yeah,
it was 98.
Yeah, so 25 years ago now.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that I'm going to ask you both a question. So, do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame, in the WWE Hall of Fame?
He definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. Now,
that goes without saying.
Yeah, but now Ted DiBiase was also in this, and he mentioned the fact that Junkyard Dog at least had some moments of clarity, at least, when he was still on the gear. And he said, when he was doing because DiBiase had started doing the preaching and the revivals, he said, look, tell my story. Tell people not to do what I did.
Yeah.
Now, I don't really know if religion is the right context for that. I mean, you could certainly tell people, you're trying to warn people not to do what Junkyard Dog did without bringing God into it. But hey, God, Junkyard Dog was maybe a religious man. We don't know.
Well, a lot of people from that part of the world were,
I suppose so.
Bible Belt and all of that. So, but Ted DiBiase being his best friend was. Oh
yeah, because Dog was the best man at his wedding.
Yeah, exactly, which was kind of a remarkable thing to find out as well. So yeah, it must have hurt. And DiBiase DiBiase was in this. Coco Beware, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Jake the Snake. Like, they must be fed up of talking about all their friends dying all the fucking time. They seem to be on this show quite often, and nearly everybody. Jim Cornette is another one.
Roberts, though, I mean, he said that when he heard that Junkyard Dog had died, he was jealous of him at the time because Roberts was going through his own drug issues at that point, and he thought, well, at least he's not in any pain anymore.
I've never been, sorry, boss man. I've never been in this level of addiction for substances like that, but I've never been addicted to those substances. But I know what it's like to want to get high all the time, and it can take over your life and every aspect, and it stops you from fulfilling other things. Like wanting to, you invest in other things because all your money goes towards that. Everything you do, that comes first, and everything else comes second. You know what I mean? And it's a bastard, and so I can totally understand where Jake was coming from regarding Junkyard Dog, because he had now escaped that torture. It wasn't going to affect him any longer, and it's still remarkable that of all the wrestlers who've come and gone, Jake the Snake Roberts is still with us. You know what I mean? It is amazing. It is amazing. But I'm happy that he is. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I'm very happy that he is. So he's been through so fucking much, more than any other guy I could think of. You know what I mean? He's been through a lot. So yeah. Obviously his daughter died soon after that. They're both kind of buried together. The story of his life is now being told by his nephew, which was a nice touch. But unfortunately, this is like too common a thing that you see with lots of wrestlers. They're on the road all the time. They do lots of self-medication. They don't see their families. They do so much in their lives to get themselves into this position. They build these great physiques. They have to have this personality. They have to be very durable people, and then they're constantly on the road. There's so much demand from you as a person to be a wrestler, and then that demand is so much so that you don't have a life of your own. You end up fucking falling down a black hole a lot of the times for a lot of these guys. It's incredibly sad, and unfortunately, Junkyard Dog was just another person amongst numerous wrestlers who this has happened to.
Yeah, I don't know if it was self-medication, because obviously Dog's drugs of choice were coke and then eventually crack.
No, but it starts off with things like marijuana, which is what Jim Ross said. It starts off with self-medication.
I've heard Jim Cornette talk about this as well. I mean, for example, when he did the What's in the Bag game with Sean Oliver, and eventually it got to the point where they pulled out a needle, and he said, look, this isn't even funny anymore. Look, it used to be, he held up the prompts for like what was like an empty bottle of Jack Daniels and a fake bag of weed, and he said, look, a little of this and a little of this was generally the wrestler's trademark. But eventually it got to the point where, in a lot of cases through Vince's hiring practice, and also in other cases where again, Vince's hiring practices where people are, having to shoot themselves up to get physiques that are just unnatural. And then people are going over the top and obviously medicating themselves heavily to where the point is like, they're finding guys with, 17 different prescriptions in them when when they're found dead.
Especially back then when kayfabe was still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that's what I'm saying. Like, there was a lot of like self-medication in this as well. Like, if you're smoking marijuana, that's 100%. That's not a drug to fucking. That's a downer drug. That's not a drug that's gonna fucking get you pumped up to do shit. You're smoking weed to chill the fuck out. You know what I mean? And as somebody who smoked weed for many years, decades even, I could tell you it was my choice for self-medication for sure. Yeah,
because one of the best things I've listened to was Lex Luger was talking about how he got into drug taking. And he said that it was like a little bit of time, like him taking Vicodin and stuff like that, and he's like, it just gets on top of you. And I think it's the same thing here. Like he was taking a little bit of speed because of the touring schedule they have to go on to keep up with it, and it's just one of those things where he just got on top of it, but he couldn't shake it. Like because Tony Atlas was saying that he was just shaking, and he was just like, he's saying it's a damn shame he couldn't shake. I couldn't shake hits.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, in regards to match quality, I've never really watched a Junkyard Dog match, as it were. But I've been told, like, early on, he was a pretty decent worker with the right guy. It just that he was there with the right
He's
guy.
an
When he's out.
entertainer. Yeah, in the Hulk Hogan sort of mold, he's very much there to pose and
the right guy
get
can
the
make him
crowd
look good.
pumped
That's
up.
why they paired him with Ted DiBiase in Mid South,
Yeah.
and it's why he would be paired up with people like Butch Reed or Kamala, or just got guys who could carry the match.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Weed is a relaxer drug. Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. That's why he did it. And hello, Mr. System. Top of the morning to you now. As it just hit midnight.
Yeah, it's
so
midnight.
Wonderful. Yep. Exactly. So yeah. All right. So that was pretty much Junkyard Dog. Have I missed anything out regarding wrapping this up?
Well, let's see. We mentioned his drug use. He was screwing over promoters left and right. Unfortunately, in the last days of his life, and again he asked Ted DiBiase, "Look, can you just please tell my story, and tell people not to go down this path I've taken." But unfortunately, again, he couldn't kick it. He wound up dead at quite a young age. By 1998, his daughter, unfortunately, is no longer around due to having heart issues of her own. So it's sad that there's a lot of the legacy that is missing, and we will never hear about, at least from their perspective.
Yeah, I want people to understand how difficult it is to quit substance abuse, because people just assume, okay, you're doing drugs, you're doing this, you're doing prescription medicine, you're doing pills, you're doing alcohol, just quit and move on. But it's not. It's never that simple. Once it gets a hold of you, and you feel that withdrawal and you feel that emptiness within you, and it needs to be fulfilled. Nothing else matters. Now, for me, one of the reasons I was able to quit the habit of smoking weed was chest pains, because there is no better motivator in this world than the fear of death. Yeah, and the fear of death motivated me to quit smoking everything. I don't smoke any tobacco. I don't do vapes. I don't do weed. I do nothing. It's all in the past. I miss it. I miss it like crazy, even to this day. I've had the odd toke here and there. I won't lie. I think I've had 3 or 4 tokes in the last 3 years. From different places, like the poker game I've been to. One of the people I was playing with, he was smoking it, and he would go in the garden and smoke it, and I'd have a toke from his. But that's about as far as it ever went. You know what I mean? I never bought my own the following day or whatever. And so like 3 or 4 occasions in the last 2 or 3 years, that's about as much as I've had. So yeah, and unless you're undead, yeah, exactly. But for me, it was knowing that I was going to die, because I like the pain I felt in my chest. I couldn't breathe properly when I was lying on my bed. It hurt. I had to lie on my side because I couldn't lie on my back because I couldn't breathe. And then I started crying to myself. But I genuinely thought I was going to die. I was too afraid to tell my dad about this because he's an old man. I don't want to just get scared and fucking something happens to him. You know what I mean? So I kept it to myself, and I told myself, "That's it. I'm done. I'll never smoke. Well, I can't say I'll never smoke again, but I'm going to quit smoking. I'm never going to buy cigarettes, tobacco, vapes, nothing, weed. It's all over." And yeah, I almost wish I quit 20 years ago. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, because I do think that, like, for some people, they get that, what's the word, that sort of warning signs. Like, because, like, I mean, myself, I've never had those alcohol, or my issue tends to be with food and eating too much of it. And the thing is that
sugar is a drug, boss man. Remember that sugar is 100% a drug.
Yeah, so I mean, I still struggle with it to this day, but I've gotten better with it, because the thing is, I try and keep my weight really down, but it's still it's because food is what I use to treat my depression and my anxiety issues. So if I ever have like a bad day, it's what I use to feel better, and it is really a vicious cycle sort of thing. You know,
I'm eating these
what's that?
sugar-free. Can you see that sugar-free?
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah,
Sugar-free chocolate-filled sweets. They taste all right. They're a bit boring, but it's what I do. You know what I mean? Just to fulfill even these. Look, these are. I'm not sure if you can see that. It says sugar-free. Let me read it to you. Oh, it's upside down. But these are Tom Thumbs, yeah. But these things are proper laxatives as well. They'll make you fucking shit through an eye with a needle. You know what I mean? And yeah. So I've been eating those as well, and they're sugar-free as well. So yeah, I do what I can, but sometimes they don't fulfill me. Sometimes I need a bit of sugar because sugar is the one drug that I'm finding very, very difficult to get off because sugar's in everything. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. I drink sugar-free drinks now and all of that sort of stuff. You know, I used to smoke black and Mars and quit, and quitting was rough. Yeah, I wish I never started. You know, hang around with the wrong crowds. You know, and that's I end up going down these rabbit holes. And it wasn't until my life was almost at the end that I decided to stop. Jim Landscape says you need willpower to start smoking. I did it years ago. I smoked cigars and drink beer, but no more. Well, drinking I've never been addicted to, but because I'm a cab driver as well, I can't drink. I can't fit it into my life, so I have no problems. And when I did get drunk once, about 4 or 5 years ago, I got fucking wrecked so hardcore that the following day, when I woke up with a hangover, a bursting bladder, and dehydration, I kind of realized I don't miss this life anymore. So it was all fucking good. I apologize for yabbering on. Yeah, so addiction. Just to go on about addiction a little bit more, Jeff Hardy. Here's a guy who just keeps repeating himself because as much as we criticize him, it ain't easy. It ain't easy coming off substances. It ain't easy to not be an addict. It ain't easy not to get to resist temptation. This is why this guy constantly fucking keeps going back to the fucking well all the time.
I mean, we could probably have a debate at some point with regard to it. Is Jeff Hardy, unfortunately, is the business, and the fact that Jeff Hardy's still involved in it, is that triggering him to go back towards substance abuse?
I think in a way, boss, but in a way, Shredder, I think if it wasn't for him being so occupied by the business, if he had more time on his hands, I think he'll be wrecked.
True, but then again, remember he was performing in bars, and that was when I think he had to take time off the road when he with AEW. He had to go into rehab. He'd been doing concerts. He'd been doing concerts in bars, and the temptation was there. And he started drinking again.
Yeah, I mean that's because he's in bars and stuff like that. But which is, being in the ring means that he's kind of distancing himself when he's on the road. If he's in other sort of scenarios and places where he's more likely to get drunk and high, he's going to get drunk and high. It's simple as that. But sorry, guys.
I was just going to say, the problem with Jeff is that what his style of wrestling, which is throwing himself off big high-ending things onto a ring or onto a table, whatever, is taking a toll on him. And your body can only take so much before you need to take pain pills and things to take to take your pain off it. So he's probably in a massive amount of pain, and the fact that he's wrestling again, I think he needs to retire. I genuinely do. I think he needs to be like an agent, something, or something backstage, or like a trainer or something like that. I think the Hardys do have a training school somewhere.
Hardy
their trainees have not been up to scratch.
Okay.
Hardy, I don't know. Jeff Hardy is a he's an artist. He genuinely is, and unfortunately, I think like many artists, I think he's gonna go. He's gonna end up maybe leaving this planet on a drug-fueled cocktail of God knows what, whilst doing his latest work. it's unfortunate. You know, he's a fucking very handsome man as well. He could be doing modeling and all of that sort of shit. Yeah, he didn't even need to do wrestling. You know what I mean? The guy, you know, he could do all of that sort of stuff. You know, like, it's just incredible. You know that he's gone down this route, and gone and fallen down this rabbit hole because there's, you know, he's got enough in him to be to find work outside of WWE for sure. He's very talented. You know, he could be a stuntman in movies. You know, all of these sort of things, like a lot of wrestlers can be. Pro wrestlers and stand-up comics share that issue, and aspartame is the same. The sugar supplement in diet sodas, yes.
How did you get off track from
no,
the dark side of the ring to this?
Well, look, yeah, he's in his 40s now. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just talking about in his younger years. You know, he could have, you know, when he was constantly getting hired and fired. You know, someone like him, you know, he could have found work elsewhere if he just looked. But he always got drawn back into wrestling. You know, but you know, I could easily, yeah. But if he was willing to cut his hair short and not look like a fucking goth, you know, the guy could be easily on a billboard promoting Amane or like the latest Gucci fucking aftershave or whatever, wearing, you know, some sort of designer suit or something like that. He's got that appearance about him. You know what I mean? He reminds me of like the David Beckham of wrestling. You know what I mean, to a degree. So and David Beckham's all tattooed up and everything as well. So anyways, updates is Deadpool. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Hardy leaves us. You know, not too long from now. And I don't want that to ever happen, to tell you the truth. Okay, I think we're done.
Yeah, the two interviews I'm somewhat disappointed we didn't get to a degree. One is New Jack because he's dead. Because New Jack has gone on record before he he and Junkyard Dog had a dispute over some money. Apparently New Jack had sold Junkyard Dog some drugs and Dog never paid for him. So
fuck it, they both deserve each other back then.
Well, Junkyard Dog showed up to an ECW event and Paul Heyman knew about this, and you know, Paul even actually offered to pay what Junkyard Dog owed New Jack. And he says, "Nope, you don't fucking owe me this money." He does. Jack wound up punching Junkyard Dog in the face, and he said he felt guilty for it because, you know, a month later is when Junkyard Dog had his wreck and died.
Yeah.
So if he'd maybe played a part in it at one point. But the other interview, obviously, I'm quite surprised actually they didn't go for was Bill Watts, because Watts is still alive.
How old is he now?
I think he's about 80 now.
Really?
Yeah,
that young?
He must be in his 80s.
I think young,
he looked like he was in his. He looked like he was in his 50s or 60s back in the day when he was when he had Junkyard Dog under contract. Anyway, sorry guys.
He's 84. Bill Watts is 84 now.
Okay, I mean, maybe they did approach him for an interview and he just said, "I'm not going to talk about it," because he didn't want to talk about the.
It's quite possible. I mean, you know,
of being racist.
There could be some sentencing that could incriminate him in various ways. You know, not just Junkyard Dog, all types.
I mean, I'm quite surprised they got Jim Ross after the plane ride from hell, because Jim Ross had said at one point he wasn't going to do any more interviews for Darkseid.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Again, it's quite shocking. So far, they've had Kevin Sullivan after the Chris Benoit episode, and now they got Jim Ross back after the plane ride from hell episode.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's important that these guys, you know, if anybody's going to talk about a particular wrestler, that maybe they feel that it warrants their input, so they don't get information from other people who had less time around these particular characters who get focused on. Anyways, next week, I think we're on a break. Next week, is that correct?
I think we are on a break. Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing until the 11th of July. So a 1 week break.
Yeah, 1 week break, and then it returns
Adrian
on
Adonis.
The 11th of July with Adrian Adonis, the tragic fall of Adrian Adonis.
Another guy who died in a car crash. And by the way, just so you know. And he had the evil gay gimmick. back then when being
Is a
gay
rip-off.
meant that you were
Is a
Yeah.
rip-off of Adrian Street, basically.
flash that cash. I'll flash this so you something else in a minute. But yeah, sorry, he's a rip off of who?
Adrian Street.
Did he come first?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have no idea.
Adrian Street was like in Motorsport, like fame in the 70s. I think Adrian Dice didn't get into WWE until like 80.
Yeah, Adrian Street and Miss Linda.
Yeah.
WWE loved, it's not WWE, but wrestling back then, they loved making heel gay characters. I remember the sort of homophobia portrayed by other wrestlers, like I think Hulk Hogan, when I think he fought Adrian Adonis and was like making like anti-gay sort of like piss takes, by like going like this and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. And even more recently, like with characters like Rico, who was only there to be some sort of stylist for Chuck and Billy, but then they made him into a gay character and they healed him up to a degree.
Yeah, because he was meant to be the mastermind behind Billy and Chuck's commitment ceremony, which was them basically getting
married,
having a gay marriage.
Yeah, and obviously there's Gold Dust as well. Take it how you want. There's some kinkiness there too. Yeah, maybe more bisexuality and stuff like that. But he always seemed like he wanted to fuck everyone he was with. And I remember that match again.
He was acting like he was in love with Razor Ramon when they first brought him in.
Yeah, I just remember the match he had with Roddy Piper, and he took his fucking outfit off when he's wearing like bra and panties and shit like that. Oh my god! Yeah.
And to think that match nearly never happened. That was supposed to be Goldust versus Razor.
Yeah, Dustin Rhodes, who's still fighting today, by the way.
Yeah, 50-something years old.
But I'll be curious to hear about the story about Adrian Street. I think that's gonna sorry, not Adrian Street.
Adrian Adonis.
Adrian Adonis. I've heard interviews from Adrian Street, but I'd be curious to hear the story about Adrian Adonis, and in particular because obviously there was that whole thing, with Cheap Heat, being a gay character back in the day.
Regarding Goldust, Dustin Rhodes, he's one of the last people from the golden era of wrestling who is still wrestling, which is amazing. But I remember him in WrestleMania 7, him and Dusty Rhodes fighting Ted DiBiase and
Virgil.
And Virgil. So that was Royal Rumble, I believe.
It was
Royal Rumble. But it was still that era, with Hogan and Warrior and Randy Savage and all of these other guys, Ted DiBiase, obviously, all these other guys were still wrestling. So he was part of that period, just maybe at the cusp of it, but he was still part of it. And now he's still wrestling today at 56. Amazing.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing. So all props to you, Dustin Rhodes. You need to get into the Hall of Fame, in my opinion,
Definitely.
for being one of the longer lasting wrestlers in the industry, not just as Goldust, just as Dustin Rhodes, and Goldust being one of his gimmicks, his major gimmick, obviously. He needs to be in the fucking Hall of Fame without a doubt, in my opinion.
He'll be there eventually.
Yeah. So
I mean, because like his run as the Natural in WCW was just as good as his run as Goldust, in my opinion.
I remember in WCW he had that thing where his arm got crushed on the car door. Was it by Scott Steiner or somebody, or Big Show or something like that? Or did he do the crushing?
I think it was. I'm trying to remember just running WCW. There was a lot of crap there, unfortunately.
And then they had a match in the back of a fucking car or some shit like that.
That was against. It was Barry Darsow. I can't remember what the hell his gimmick was at the time. I think it was Bricktop Bully. But him and Barry Darsow had that match in the back of a truck. They wound up bleeding, and both of them wound up being fired over it.
Yeah,
because WCW's policy was no blood.
Yeah, well, you put us in the back of a fucking truck. But yeah, so he's been involved in a lot of shit. From like tag teaming with his dad, to that particular gimmick match, to Goldust, of course, to reinventing himself and like Black Rain and putting on weight, then losing the weight. But he was so fucking fat at one point. You know what I mean?
Dustin will not talk about Black Rain. Anytime anyone has tried to bring up Black Rain, Dustin refuses to talk about this time in
Fair
TV as
enough.
that character.
Oh,
enough,
I remember when he tried to do that, and it was just like.
But he's
That
also
was- It was rough.
he's a grand slammer as well. He was in the NWA as well, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, so he's been in everything. You know what I mean?
I think the only thing he
he's
wasn't
been-
in is ECW. Everything else, every other promotion. I think he
Oh
was in.
yeah,
He
you're right.
didn't do ECW.
Yeah. That's the one he missed out. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, good
I
point.
think he's done everything else though. I think he did a little bit of ROH, if memory serves right.
Dustin?
Really?
Yeah, I think he did a little bit of it. I'm not sure it was a lot, but I think he did like maybe a couple of appearances.
No, not Cody worked ROH. I don't think Dustin's ever done it.
Time to Google.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
I know Dusty Rhodes did ECW. Dustin didn't. Because Dusty had a hell of a feud with Steve Corino. But I'm pretty sure Dustin... I don't recall Dustin ever working in ROH.
Can't get a quick answer. I'm afraid. But Dustin Rhodes working backstage at ROH Supercard? Let's find
He
out.
might have worked backstage, under the AEW era.
Yeah. God, he's looking old now, by the way. Fuck me. Yeah, I hope he doesn't die in the ring. But all right. Well, look, let's wrap this up. I have some shit to do tomorrow morning, as well as tomorrow afternoon, as Penny can confess. So yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks regarding Dark Side of the Ring. We'll be back tomorrow talking about Star Trek New Strange New World season 2 episode 3. And
how would you guys rate this episode of Dark Side?
Oh yes,
I would give it a strong 8 because I thought it was important to talk about one of the pioneers, and probably like if it wasn't for Junkyard, would we have like people like Booker T, D'Lo Brown, Ron Simmons, guys who, would we even have people like Big E, Lanston, Kofi Kingston being WWE champion? Was he not the progenitor of that? So I thought it was good for that reason.
I'm going to give this episode a 7. I felt like this episode was very similar to a lot of episodes I've seen of Dark Side Ring regarding a wrestler who had it all and then lost it all. And drugs and stuff like that. And then unfortunately also died, and you could every season of Dark Side of the Ring, I'm sure you'll find something along those lines in each season of a particular wrestler. So it's no different. Personally, I wanted, I think racism was there in some capacity, but Vice decided not to focus on that, which is fair enough. It didn't need to, but it would have been interesting to see how much of a part of racism was around someone like Junkyard Dog in those years. Which wrestlers were racist, which towns were the most racist, what obstacles that he had to overcome because of racism. All of these sort of things that would have been nice to have come across, but that wasn't the case in this episode. And I'm okay with that as well. But it would be nice to know if there was anything like that. But I'm sure there was. I'm pretty sure there was. We're talking America Deep South.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I am going to agree. Probably a solid 7 out of 10. It was a very, very good episode. It was a great retrospective about Junkyard Dog and his rise to stardom. But again, yeah, they probably could have done a bit more with regard to Dog's issues with racism in the Deep South. All the stuff he would have had to overcome, as a wrestler back in those days, with regard to racism. It probably shouldn't have been the main focus of this episode specifically, because obviously it's about Junkyard Dog. I think focusing on his rise and then obviously his sudden fall from grace in the last few years of his life, particularly because of his rampant drug abuse. That was probably the main focus, and deservedly so. Maybe Darkseid will at some point do a whole episode on racism in the Deep South in the 70s and 80s through pro wrestling, or even the history of racism in general in pro wrestling, because you can look at all the stuff that went on with Vince McMahon.
If anything, racism kind of affected the wrestlers we didn't get to see in this episode because they never got their opportunity simply because Junkyard Dog was in the industry and was so popular that other wrestlers who are black couldn't get their opportunity because these territories back then, they only picked you if if you're white, you'd probably be happy to be part of the furniture. If you're black, well, if you're already a black wrestler, then sorry, son. And if we make you a heel, then there's no fucking chance you're going to be part of this industry.
Well, that's even if the promoter would book you. That's even if the promoter would book the guys, because there was a lot of promoters wouldn't touch black wrestlers back in those days.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, the world is better because of Junkyard Dog being in it, because he did. Yes, you're right, Gary. He definitely did open the door. I do also feel that if it wasn't Junkyard Dog, it would have been somebody else. As much as I thought he was, I don't think he was in the sense that he was not replaceable as a trailblazer, if you know what I mean. So, yeah. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah, if it wasn't him, it would be somebody else.
I'm not entirely sure because again, Dog had he had charisma, he had star power all over him. He had much more of that than any of the other black wrestlers that, again, Bill Watts tried to push subsequently afterwards. They could never replace him. Who are they talking about beating that Dog? Who that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but Rocky Johnson comes to mind. Obviously,
Rocky Johnson, I don't think had the charisma, to be honest, to pull it off.
Oh, fair enough.
Decent worker, but again, I don't think he had the charisma to pull it off. Tony Atlas, decent worker, but unfortunately, I don't think he had the charisma or even the mental acumen to put everything all together. I mean, there's a story where he went into work at a territory and they basically told him, right, well, you're fired after his first match, because they'd hyped him up as like the world's they hyped him up as the world's strongest man, because he was legitimately a powerlifter. He was one of the strongest people in the country at that point, and they thought what happened was they brought him in, and his first match he was against like a jobber, and he gave this guy a solid 10-minute match. It was like, no, you should be beating this guy in like 2 minutes.
Yeah,
you basically killed your own fucking gimmick.
Yeah, because the story that Shredder just told, I think Al still tells that story where...
Oh, he tells that to trainees, I'm pretty sure. He tells them, look, don't kill your own fucking gimmick.
Yeah, because basically what happened was that it was Ollie Anderson. And basically they had it where he actually lifted like 500 pounds or what it was. And then he wrestled somebody the size of Tajiri. No, not Tajiri. What's his name? The guy, kind side guy, not flaming.
Funaki.
Yeah. He basically wrestled a guy that size for 10 minutes, as Shredder was just saying. And basically, Ollie just said, "Oh, thank you for that." He went, "Oh, all right." But he went, "No, thank you." He says, "You just killed the town." He says, and then just killed it dead. And it's just like, yeah. He says, because he said, imagine you don't know anything about wrestling. How long do you think it'll take that guy to face that guy? It's just like, you got a point. It's like,
Well, listen, guys, my eyelids are now winning the battle over my consciousness. So we're going to wrap this up. As I said, so 7 from me and Shredder, and 8 from Bossman. Let us know in the comments below what you guys think of this regarding a 10 out of whatever rating. We'll be back tomorrow talking about Strange New Worlds. We got our Sodomizer podcast on Friday, and at some point in between now and then, we'll try and fit in some Secret Invasion as well, and whatever else we can think of as well if it comes up. Any breaking news, like maybe Donald Trump and Andrew Tate sharing the same jail cell or something like that. Who knows? All right. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to NerdTube. Thank you, fellas, for joining me. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.